In front of the entire pack, her fated mate looked her in the eyes and chose someone else. She didn't beg, her bled, and walked into the dark alone. Something in her blood shouldn't exist anymore. Beyond the border lives the most feared alpha in the region, enemy territory. No mercy for strays, but he opened his gates. Now her ex is invoking ancient pack law, a death trial, not to win her back, to destroy what he couldn't control. The alpha finds her scar, doesn't ask, just goes still. Like a man recognizing something he's been searching for without knowing it. She doesn't look away 6 territories. One circle, torches burning, her eyes flash silver, wolves drop to their knees. A bloodline 3 generations extinct, standing right in front of them, armies gathering, borders breaking, the man who called her nothing, watching his world crumble. You never owned her, you never could. The full moon had turned the color of bone, not the soft ivory kind. Not the kind that looks pretty in postcards, the yellowed, ancient kind, the kind your grandmother warned you about, the kind that shows up in old stories, nights when the laws of nature bend, nights when the moon goddess stops being polite. It was that kind of night, and under it, a woman crossed the eastern ridge alone. No pack sent with her, no weapons. Nothing but a torn blue dress and a will that refused to lie down and die. His name was Dagmar Voss, Alpha of the Shadow Veil Pack. Dark-haired, broad through the shoulders, dressed in leather worn smooth from battles he had already won. He was not a man who hesitated. He had built his pack on precision, on discipline, on the simple, hard truth that every choice carries a price. He thought he had seen everything the night could throw at him. He was wrong. Because Halvard dragged something through the border gates that stopped him cold. A woman, barely standing, auburn hair tangled and damp against her cheek, skin pale as riverstone in winter, the remains of a blue dress hanging off one shoulder. There was dried blood on her collarbone, and no, not a battle wound, the kind that comes from a broken mate bond, the kind that eats a person alive quietly. From the inside, Halvard held her upright with both arms. Big man, quiet face, Dagmar's most trusted warrior. He looked down at the woman like he wasn't quite sure what he was carrying. The woman's eyes were half open, defiant even now. She crossed the ridge alone, Halvard said. No pack, no weapons, nothing. Dagmar studied her face. He had seen fear before. He knew its many shapes. But this was something rarer. This was a person who had already decided that dying was not on the menu, no matter how close death stood, no matter how patiently it waited. That decision was written across her whole face. What's your name? Dagmar asked. Her voice came out quiet, but clear. Renata. Who did this to you? Her jaw tightened. Just slightly. Someone who thought I was nothing. Dagmar was silent a long moment. The torchlight moved across his face and told her nothing. Then he said 3 words. Bring her inside, and somehow, to a woman who had walked 2 days through cold forest to reach a stranger's gate. Those 3 words felt like the most solid thing anyone had handed her in 3 months. But this story does not begin at the Shadow Veil border. It begins 3 months earlier, under a different moon, before a different fire. A fire that was supposed to celebrate joy, and instead became the worst night of Renata's life. Every year when the first frost touched the mountains, the Thornwood pack gathered for the sacred moon ceremony. It was not a celebration of power. It was older than that. Older than the pack houses. Older than the borders themselves. A tradition passed down through every generation. All the way back to the night the moon goddess first breathed life into wolfkind. Under the ceremonial fire, fated bonds revealed themselves. Golden threads, invisible to the eye, but felt bone deep by every wolf in the circle. The threads would stretch between 2 souls. Souls chosen for each other before either of them drew a first breath. Renata had waited for this night her whole life. She was 23. Dark auburn hair that fell past her shoulders in loose waves. Gentle brown eyes, the kind of eyes people mistook for softness. Right up until she stared them down in training. She was not the loudest wolf in Thornwood, not the fastest, not the most decorated. She was the kind of woman who stayed late to help the old ones carry firewood. The kind who remembered your name the first time she heard it. The kind whose loyalty ran so deep that people who didn't understand it mistook it for weakness. It wasn't. But Lucian Heir had never learned to tell the difference. Lucian was everything an alpha was supposed to look like. On the outside, tall. Golden hair swept back from a sharp, handsome face. Green eyes that caught the firelight and held it. He wore his pack insignia on a dark jacket, and the jacket said, without one word, that he had never once wondered whether he belonged in a room. His posture was built by years of people agreeing with him. Before he even finished a sentence, he was also, though Renata didn't know it yet, deeply afraid. Afraid of anything that might make him look ordinary. The ceremony began just after midnight. Hundreds of wolves stood in a wide circle around the sacred fire. The air smelled of burning cedar and cold earth. The elder Winfreda stood at the fire's edge, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, keeper of pack history, a woman whose silence carried more weight than most people's loudest speeches. One by one, she called the mated pairs forward, and then the thread pulled between Lucian and Renata. The whole pack felt it. A ripple moved through the crowd, gasps, a few quiet tears from the older women, the ones who still remembered their own bonding nights. The thread glowed warm between them, unhurried, absolute. The way true things tend to be. Renata felt it like a hand pressed flat against her chest. Like coming home after a very long journey. She looked across the fire at Lucian. For 3 seconds he looked back, and then his face changed, not slowly, all at once, like a door slamming shut. He crossed the circle, the kind of slow that is performed, not natural. Every eye in the pack was on him, and he knew it. He stopped 2 feet from her. "I refuse the bond," he said. The fire crackled in the silence. "You are not fit to be my Luna." Renata did not cry. Not then. She was too stunned for tears. She stood perfectly still while those words rearranged everything inside her that had felt settled and whole. Lucian turned away before she could answer. He walked to Saskia Rhea, copper-haired, warrior-trained. Every inch the image of a decorated fighter. He placed his hand at her waist, and Saskia's face flickered. Not happiness, something more complicated. The look of a person handed something they never asked for. Something they don't know how to give back without making a scene. But the pack saw what Lucian wanted them to see. And the murmuring began. Renata stood alone in the center of the circle. The golden thread between her and Lucian did not disappear. That was the cruelest part. A mate bond once revealed cannot be erased by a refusal. It can be severed, but severance takes time, or ceremony, or death. Until then, the bond stays, incomplete, unfinished, like a deep wound left open to the cold, and it drains you. She walked herself home that night in the dark. Alone, she did not look back. What the old stories leave out is the science of it. Ottilie was the pack healer, a practical woman in her 40s. No nonsense. Famous for telling the truth while everyone else was busy being polite. She sat across from Renata 3 days after the ceremony, and she explained it plainly. The mate bond is biological, Ottilie said, as much as it is spiritual. Your wolf recognizes its other half, and when that recognition gets denied, your wolf's energy has nowhere to go. So it turns inward. It starts eating you alive. Renata looked down at her hands. They had been trembling since the morning after. How long do I have? Ottilie was quiet a moment. Weeks, if you stay close to him. The bond gets more confused the nearer you are to the wolf who rejected it. Every time you feel him through the thread, his mood, his presence, it tears the wound open again. And if I leave, it slows. It doesn't stop, but it slows. Renata nodded, slowly. Then Ottilie went very still. She reached out, pushed back the torn shoulder of Renata's dress, and looked at something on the skin near the collarbone. An old scar, faint, silver-white, easy to miss in ordinary light. "Where did you get this?" Ottilie asked. "I've always had it," my mother said. "I fell. When I was small." Ottilie didn't answer right away, because she had seen marks like that before, only once. In a healer's text so old the pages crumbled at the corners. "Renata," Ottilie said carefully, "your wolf, the way your energy collapses and then surges, that isn't ordinary bond damage. I think your wolf has been suppressed. For a long time. Not by injury," she paused. "By design," Renata frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means somebody made you small. On purpose. And I don't think it was Lucian." Ottilie's voice dropped. "I think it started long before him." The fire popped in the grate. Renata did not know what to do with that, so she filed it away. The way she filed away everything too heavy to carry in the moment, and she went to find her sister. Brielle March was 20 years old, 5'4" of controlled fury in a ponytail. And she had spent 3 days barely stopping herself from marching to Lucian's door, to say things that would get her banished by sunrise. She was sitting on Renata's porch when Renata came out with 2 mugs of tea. "I've been thinking," Brielle said. "I know that face." Renata sat down. "That face scares me." "Good. Because I'm serious." Brielle wrapped both hands around her mug. "You can't stay here, Brielle. You're getting weaker every morning. I watched you grip the railing today. Like you're 90 years old. Don't tell me you're fine." Renata stared into her tea. She didn't tell her she was fine. Then you know what I'm about to say, Brielle said. I have a guess. Leave the territory. Get away from the bond. Give your wolf room to breathe. Brielle's voice dropped to something softer. You are not nothing. That man is a fool. And fools have always been too small to recognize what's standing right in front of them. Renata set down her mug. She thought about the fire, the thread, the way Lucian turned away. Where would I even go? And that was when Brielle did something strange. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. Old paper, yellowed at the edges. The kind that comes from a place it shouldn't. I found this in Winfreda's old records, Brielle said. I wasn't supposed to be in there. We can talk about that later, Brielle. There's a pack beyond the Eastern Ridge. The Shadow Vale pack. Dagmar Voss is their alpha. He's hard, but he's fair. They don't attack lone wolves crossing the border. Long as you come unarmed, Renata took the paper. Dagmar Voss, she read the name twice. Lucan's greatest rival. Brielle raised an eyebrow. Isn't that a little bit poetic? And despite everything, despite the wound in her chest and the tremble in her hands, the corner of Renata's mouth moved. It wasn't much of a smile, but it was the first one in 3 days. Brielle held onto it like it was gold, but there was something Brielle hadn't said yet. Because she'd found more than a map in those records. She'd found a name, a note in Winfreda's careful hand, tucked beside an entry about Renata's mother, and she hadn't decided yet whether to share it, which was its own kind of betrayal, and she knew it, so she sat on it, for now. The night before Renata left, she couldn't sleep, so she walked, out past the training grounds, up to the old bonding stone where the ceremony was always held. The fire was long dead, just ash and cold cedar and a moon that had finally turned back to ivory, and she wasn't alone. Winfreda was there. The elder stood at the edge of the dead fire, wrapped in a grey shawl, looking at the ashes like she could read something in them. She didn't turn around when Renata approached. She didn't have to. You're leaving, Winfreda said. Not a question. In the morning, Renata said. Good. That surprised her. She had expected the elder to argue, to talk about loyalty, about staying. You're not going to tell me to stay? Winfreda finally turned, and in the moonlight, her sharp eyes were softer than Renata had ever seen them. Child, I have kept this pack's records for 40 years. I have watched a great many things I was not allowed to speak of, and I am very tired of watching. The wind moved through the dead ash. Your mother came to me once, Winfreda said. Before you were born, she asked me to write something down, and then she asked me to never let you read it. Renata's breath caught. What did she ask you to write? Winfreda was quiet for a long moment. And then she said the thing that would follow Renata across the Eastern Ridge and into the rest of her life. That you were never meant to stay small. And that someone made very sure you would. The fire was dead, but something in Renata's chest, for the first time in 3 months, felt like it had caught a spark. Who? She whispered. But Winfreda only shook her head. That is not my secret to give. It belongs to the road ahead of you. And to the wolf you have not met yet. She pulled her shawl tighter. Go to Shadow Vale, cross the ridge, and do not come back the same. It was, Renata would realize much later, less a goodbye than a prophecy. She left on a Tuesday morning, no ceremony for that. Just a worn leather satchel, a change of clothes, a healer's kit utterly pressed into her hands at the door. The quiet efficiency of a woman who has learned that worry is most useful when it takes a practical form. And her sister's arms around her for one long, wordless minute. Don't disappear, Brielle said. I won't, she meant it. The Eastern Ridge was a 2-day walk through dense forest, pine sap and old stone, and by the first evening her legs were shaking from something that had nothing to do with distance. The broken bond worked in her chest like a splinter, pressed deeper with every mile. Every step away from Lucian helped, marginally. The way a cracked window helps in a room already burning. She slept against a tree root that night. She ate the bread Ottilie had packed. She kept moving, and somewhere in the dark between the first day and the second she made a quiet decision. Not a dramatic one, no fist raised at the sky. Just a small, stubborn thought that settled into her bones and refused to leave. Whatever I am going to find out. On the second day the trees changed. The pines grew taller, darker, closer together. The air took on a different weight, older, wilder. She crossed into Shadow Vale territory before she fully registered it, which was exactly when Halvard stepped out from between 2 trees. 2 warriors behind him. Renata stopped. She raised both hands, slowly. Palms out. I am not a threat, she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that even now, even shaking. I am unarmed, I am alone, I am requesting passage to your Alpha. Halvard studied her a long moment. She knew what he was seeing, torn dress, pale skin. The tremor in her hands she was working so hard to hide. He made his decision in about 4 seconds. Can you walk? I've been walking for 2 days, she said. I can manage a little further. He almost smiled. Almost. The Shadowvale compound was nothing like Thornwood, where Thornwood was built for appearance. Clean buildings, manicured grounds, architecture that announced wealth before you reached the gate. Shadowvale was built for one thing: function stone walls, wide training grounds worn flat by generations of boots, buildings low and solid against wind and winter. It looked like Plekteses had survived things. Renata respected it immediately. Dagmar met her in the main hall, taller than she expected. Black hair cut short above a jaw that looked carved with patience. His eyes were dark gray, the color of sky right before a storm decides what it wants to do. He wore a simple dark leather jacket. No insignia, no ornament, power, she realized, that felt no need to announce itself. He asked her 2 questions, her name, and who had done this to her. She answered both honestly, and when she told him Lucian Heir had rejected her before the whole of Thornwood, and left her with an incomplete bond, Dagmar's expression did not change. He did not offer easy sympathy. He did not make speeches. He was not the kind of man who filled silence with reassurances he couldn't back up. He looked at Halvard. Take her to the inner rooms, but what happened next? No one in that hall expected, because as Halvard moved to help her, Renata's legs finally gave out. She went down, and as she fell for just 1 second, 1 single second, her eyes caught the torchlight at a strange angle. And they flashed, not brown, silver, bright, impossible silver. Like moonlight caught in glass, it lasted less than a heartbeat. Then it was gone, and she was just a half-collapsed woman on a stone floor, and Halvard was lifting her. And the moment passed, but Dagmar saw it. He did not say a word, he did not change his face, but his eyes followed her out of the hall, sharp, still, calculating something he could not yet name. And later that night, after she was asleep, he called Halvard back. The woman, Dagmar said. What about her? Dagmar was quiet a long moment. Outside, the bone-colored moon had finally set, and the real moon, the ivory one, hung clean and bright over the stone walls. Watch her, Dagmar said. Closely? You think she's dangerous? No. Dagmar's gray eyes stayed on the dark hallway where they'd carried her. I think she has no idea what she is. And I think that's a far more interesting problem. Halvard waited for more. But that was all he got. Because Dagmar Voss had built his entire life on the understanding that every decision carries a consequence. And he had the strangest feeling, standing there, under the clean white moon, that the decision he had just made, 3 small words at a border gate, was going to carry the largest consequence of his life. He just didn't know yet whether it would save his pack, or end it. Renata slept 14 hours that first night, and somewhere in that long, deep dark, for the first time in 3 months, the screaming in her chest dropped to a murmur. She dreamed of a fire, not the Thornwood fire, not the night she lost everything, a different one, older, warmer, a fire she had never seen but somehow knew, and in the dream a voice she didn't recognize, a woman's voice, saying her name like it mattered, saying, "There you are, I was wondering when you'd wake up." She woke at dawn with tears on her face and no memory of why, and one word sitting in her mouth like a stone she hadn't swallowed, silver. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. The first week passed in that haze. Ottilie's herbal compound slowed the bond's slow burn, and the distance from Lucian did the rest. That constant low ache in her chest, the feeling of her own energy draining through a cracked pipe, it dulled. Inch by inch distant helped. Rest helped. Good food helped, but you want to know what helped most? Nobody looked at her with pity. The Shadowvale wolves did not coddle. They also did not stare. They passed her in the corridors with a nod. They made room at the meal tables without making a thing of it. There was a plain, uncomplicated respect for privacy here, and Renata hadn't realized how starved for it she'd been, until it was simply handed to her. No price attached. Dagmar came to her on the 8th morning. She was sitting by a window, watching the training grounds, a bowl of porridge going cold in her hands. "You're looking better," he said. "I'm feeling better," she paused. Marginally. Something in his voice was almost amused. "So you're a glass half-empty type. I'm a glass accurately assessed type." And he smiled. It changed his whole face, made him seem suddenly younger, not softer, but reachable, like a door she hadn't noticed was there. "When you're ready," he said. "I'd like to know what you can do. I'm a pack wolf, not a warrior, Everyone here is a pack wolf first. He leaned against the wall. I'm not asking for your combat record. I'm asking what you're good at, she thought about it. Honestly, I notice things other people miss. I'm good at reading a room. I remember everything I hear. She paused. And I don't scare easily. He held her gaze a beat too long. No, he said. I can see that. Then he walked away and left her to her cold porridge. And she stared at the spot where he'd been standing for a full 10 seconds. Before she caught herself doing it. What are you doing? Stop that. You crossed a mountain to get away from a man. You did not cross it to start watching a different one walk out of rooms. She ate her porridge. It was cold. She didn't care. It was Maeve who started her in training. Maeve was one of Shadowvale's senior warriors. Compact, fast, forearms that looked built by someone with very strong opinions about hard work. She was not gentle in her methods. She was also not cruel. There is a difference. And Maeve understood it better than most. You're compensating on your left side, Maeve said on the third day, circling her. The focused attention of a chess player reading a board. Every time you reach, you pull back. Half an inch, old injury, Renata said. Is it healed? Yes. Then stop protecting it. Maeve stopped circling. Your body thinks it's fragile. Your body is wrong. Renata worked on it. She pushed through session after session, and somewhere around the 11th one, something shifted. She stopped thinking about what Lucian had said about her. Not because the words lost their sting, but because she was too busy, learning that her body could do things she had never once asked it to do. She ran faster than she thought she could. She held positions longer than she had any right to. She solved problems in sparring that made Maeve stop mid-correction and nod, which, from Maeve, was practically a parade. You're not weak, Maeve told her one evening, tossing her a water flask. You've just never been somewhere that believed in you long enough for you to figure that out. Renata caught the flask, and she held those words like they were warm, because nobody had ever said them to her before. And because some part of her, the part Lucian had tried to put out at that fire, was starting to wonder if they might be true. Caspian was a different kind of teacher. Shadowvale's pack strategist, tall, lanky, reading glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, a habit of talking through problems out loud. Whether or not you were following along, he was also, unexpectedly, very funny, the dry, offhand kind. The kind that comes from a man who finds the whole world a little absurd and has long since made his peace with it. He started teaching her pack politics in the second week. It began as one question about territorial agreements. It became daily sessions that ran 2 and 3 hours. The mistake most alphas make, Caspian said one afternoon, spreading a regional map across a wide table, is thinking power is about dominance, raw force. Biggest wolf wins, isn't it? Short term. Sometimes he tapped the map. The pack's still standing after 200 years. They're the ones led by alphas who understood relationships, trade, trust, who to call in a crisis, who to leave alone. Renata looked down at the map. Shadowvale sat at the center of several crossroads, and she saw immediately why it mattered. She said so. Caspian pushed his glasses up. Most people stare at this map a long while before they see that. How long usually? I didn't say, he said, mildly, which was not an answer. And they both knew it. She laughed. It surprised her, the ease of it. Laughter had felt very far away for a while, and here it was, back, like a bird that had finally decided the storm was over. On a cold afternoon in the 4th week, Renata was sparring with Maeve, and she felt it, a surge. From somewhere deep inside her, not pain, the opposite of pain. Like something long pressed flat suddenly standing up straight. Her wolf, her real wolf, the one Ottilie had said was buried under years of stress and silence. It stirred. For the first time in her life, Renata stopped mid-movement. Just stopped, hand still raised. Maeve caught the shift instantly. What is it? I don't know. Renata's voice came out strange. Something moved, and Maeve went very still. She was looking at Renata with an expression Renata had never seen on her. Not the measured attention of a trainer, something closer to awe, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of fear. Renata, Maeve said slowly. Your eyes just changed color. They sent for Winfreda. Not the Thornwood elder, Shadowvale's own keeper of records. A woman who had read things most wolves didn't know existed. She arrived within the hour, unhurried, as she did everything. But there was a sharpness behind her calm. The look of a mind working very fast behind a carefully still face. She looked at Renata a long moment, then asked her to shift. Renata tried, and for the first time in her adult life. The shift came differently, not the lean auburn wolf she had always known. Something pulled at the edges of that shape. something silver-white, pressing through. Like light through old cloth, Renata shifted back before the change finished. It had taken everything she had. Winfrieda was silent a very long time. "Child," she finally said, "your bloodline was not suppressed by accident. Whoever raised you, whoever shaped your world, kept you small, and the effect is the same whether they meant it or not." She folded her hands. "You have been carrying a white silver wolf your entire life. And nobody told you." The room went quiet. "What does that mean?" Renata asked. And Winfrieda told her the thing that would change everything. "It means the moon goddess did not choose you for Lucian Heir, because she thought you needed a strong alpha at your side." She paused. "She chose that bond because she knew exactly what would happen when he refused it. She knew where the road would lead." Renata's breath caught. "She knew he'd reject me. She knew you'd survive it. And she knew who you'd become on the other side." Winfrieda's eyes were soft now. "Child, there is a difference between knowing where a road ends and knowing who walks out of it." It landed in Renata's chest like a stone dropped in still water. All this time she'd thought she was a mistake, a bond that broke, a woman left at a fire, and here was an old woman telling her she had been chosen, on purpose, for exactly this. She didn't know whether to feel comforted or furious. That night she couldn't sleep, so she walked out to the wall of the compound, looking east toward the mountains, toward Thornwood, and she was not alone. Dagmar was there. He didn't startle her. She'd half expected him. He had a way of appearing wherever she happened to be. She'd noticed it. She'd told herself it was coincidence. Several times, she was running out of times. "You can't sleep," he said. "My wolf is a white-silver bloodline that's been lost for 3 generations. She kept her eyes on the mountains, apparently. So no, I can't sleep." He huffed something close to a laugh. "Fair." They stood in silence a while. "The good kind. The kind that doesn't need filling." "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You will anyway. Why did you let me stay?" "You had no reason to. I was a stranger from a rival pack. Half dead on your border." He was quiet a moment. "You raised your hands," he said. "You were barely standing, and you still raised your hands and announced yourself. Most people in that state don't do that. They panic, they run, or they collapse." He looked at her. "You were thinking clearly under pressure. That's rare, so you kept me because I was useful. No accusation in it. Just an honest read. I kept you because I thought you deserved a chance." His gray eyes held hers. "Those two things aren't enemies." The torch nearby popped, quietly, and something shifted between them. Not sudden, it had been building for weeks, the way a season changes without you noticing. Until one morning the air is entirely different, and you realize winter arrived while you weren't looking. He reached out, very deliberately, and put his hand over hers on the cold stone of the wall. Just that. No words. Renata looked at his hand, then at his face. She did not move away, and inside her chest, where the broken Thornwood bond had screamed for 3 months, there was, for one impossible second, quiet. 2 nights later, there was a knock at the gate. Not a warrior, not a messenger on a tired horse. A woman, alone, hood up, having crossed the border under cover of dark and rain. Saskia Rhea, copper hair plastered to her face, travel-worn. The last person Renata expected to ever see again. They brought her into the council room, dripping, defiant, and when the hood came down and Renata saw who it was, her whole body went cold. "You," Renata said. "Me," Saskia met her eyes. "Steady. I crossed 2 borders to get here, so before you throw me out. Listen, give me one reason, Lucian." That was the reason, and they both knew it. Renata sat down. "Slowly, talk," and Saskia talked. "Lucian is going to challenge for you," she said. "Not because he wants you. He doesn't. He never did." A bitter twist of her mouth. "He wants to not lose. There's a difference. And it's the only thing that man has ever truly understood. I figured that out at the fire," Renata said. "You don't know the half of it." Saskia pulled a folded paper from inside her wet coat. "He's invoking old law, the territorial ward clause. He's going to claim you were a ward of Thornwood, and demand your return. That's a legal stretch so thin you could read through it is, which is why he's also preparing a challenge. An alpha trial of claim. Against Dagmar, her eyes flicked to him. 6 territories, witnesses. He wants the whole region to watch him take back what embarrassed him." The room was silent. Renata felt her wolf stir again, low, like a growl that hadn't decided to surface yet. "Why?" Renata said slowly. "Are you the one telling me this?" "And here," Saskia faltered. For the first time, the warrior cracked. "Because I'm so tired," she said, quietly, "of cleaning up after a man who chooses things for the wrong reasons. He chose me at that fire. Did you know that?" He put his hand on my waist in front of the whole pack, and he never once asked if I wanted it. Renata stared at her, because she had spent 3 months thinking of Saskia as the woman who got chosen, and she'd never once stopped to wonder if Saskia had wanted to be. "You're not a villain," Renata said, almost to herself. "Are you?" "No." Saskia's voice was flat. "I'm just tired, same as you. We were standing on two ends of the same bad night, and neither of us picked it. Something passed between the two women then. Not friendship, not yet, but the strange, quiet recognition of two people who survived the same storm from different rooms." "There's one more thing," Saskia said. Of course there was. "What?" And Saskia looked for one breath like she didn't want to say it. "It's about your mother." The whole room went still. Renata's hands, rent onto the table, went cold. "What about my mother?" "When I started looking into Lucan's claim," Saskia said carefully, "I went through the old Thornwood archives, the bonding registries, and I found an entry. From the year you were born." She paused. "There was a note attached, in your mother's hand, a request to seal your bloodline records, to list you as ordinary stock. That doesn't make sense." Renata's voice was barely there. "Why would she?" "There was more." Saskia slid a second paper across the table. "A letter she never sent. I think she meant to give it to you someday, and never found the moment." Renata did not touch it. She looked at it like it might bite, because she had spent her whole life being told she was nothing special. Quiet, ordinary, easy to overlook, and her own mother had written it down, in ink. "On purpose." "Why?" Renata whispered. "Why would she do that to me?" And it was Winfreda, standing in the corner, who answered. The old woman who had kept secrets for 40 years and was, she'd said herself, very tired of watching. "Read the letter, child," Winfreda said gently, "before you decide what it means. People hide their daughters for 2 reasons. Because they're ashamed of them," she paused, "or because they're terrified of what the world will do to them when it finds out what they are." Renata's hand trembled over the paper. She did not open it, not yet, because some doors once opened cannot be closed again, and she had only just begun to feel whole. She carried the unopened letter for 3 days. She slept with it under her pillow. She trained with it tucked in her belt. She sat at meals and felt it there. Like a coal that wouldn't cool, on the 3rd night, Dagmar found her on the wall again. "You haven't opened it," he said. "How do you know?" "Because you'd be different if you had." He stood beside her, close, not touching. A thing like that changes a person's face. She looked out at the mountains. "What if it's bad?" she said. "What if she really was ashamed of me? What if I open it and the last thing my mother ever gave me is a reason to feel small again?" Dagmar was quiet a long moment. "My father," he finally said, "taught me leadership was weight, not glory. That the best thing a leader could do was make sure the people under them never had to wonder whether they were safe." She glanced at him. "That's why you let me stay, isn't it?" He didn't deny it. "When Halvard brought you through that gate, I looked at you and I saw someone who had no safe place left in the world. And I could not leave that alone." Renata's throat tightened. "You're not cold," she said. "You just don't explain your reasons. Most people don't need my reasons. They need my decisions. I'm not most people." He looked at her for a long, long moment. "No," he said, quietly, "you're not." And then he reached up and brushed a strand of auburn hair back from her face. The same deliberate, unhurried way he did everything. Her breath went still. "Open the letter," he said. "Whatever's in it, you won't be reading it alone." So she opened it. Right there, on the wall, under an ivory moon, with a man beside her who had never once asked her to be smaller than she was. The handwriting was her mother's. She knew it the way you know a voice in the dark. She read it once, silently. Her hand came up to her mouth. She read it again, and then the tears came. Not the broken kind from the night of the fire. A different kind. The kind that comes when a story you'd believed your whole life turns out to be a lie. A kind lie, but a lie all the same. "What does it say?" Dagmar asked. Softly, Renata's voice shook. "She says she's sorry." She wiped her face. "She says when I was born, the healer saw the silver in my eyes. And she knew what I was. A white-silver bloodline. The kind packs go to war over. The kind that gets stolen, or used, or killed for what it carries." She drew a breath. "So she hid me. She sealed the records. She raised me quiet. She let everyone believe I was ordinary." Her voice cracked. "Because she would rather have a small daughter, who was alive, than an extraordinary one, who became a prize." The wind moved across the mountains. "She made me small," Renata whispered, "to keep me safe." Dagmar said nothing for a moment. Then, "Do you hate her?" And Renata thought about it. Really thought. She thought about every time she'd been overlooked, Every time she'd shrunk herself in a room. Every time she'd believed she was nothing because the people who raised her never told her otherwise. And then she thought about a frightened mother, holding a baby with silver in its eyes, making the only choice she could think of to keep that baby breathing. "No," Renata said finally. "No, I don't hate her." She folded the letter, carefully, like something precious. "I think she was a frightened woman who loved me the only clumsy way she knew how." A tear slid down, and I think she'd be so angry that it took a man rejecting me at a fire to finally set me free. She looked up at the mountains, toward Thornwood, toward her mother's grave. "I forgive you, Mama," she said. "To the wind, to the dark, to no one and everyone. I understand now, and I forgive you." And in her chest, where the broken bond had screamed and then quieted, and then gone strangely warm, her wolf settled, full and clean and finally awake. But the world does not pause for a woman to heal, because the very next morning, a rider came, pale, sweating. A young Thornwood messenger named Danek, whose horse had clearly disagreed with the pace he'd set. He carried a sealed letter, and he handed it over like it might burn his fingers. Halvard brought it to Dagmar in the council hall. Dagmar read it once. His expression did not change. It never did. But Renata, who had spent these weeks learning to read this man's stillness, saw the muscle tighten in his jaw. He set the letter down. "Call the senior council," he said. The challenge had come. An alpha trial of claim. 6 territories. Witnesses required. Old law, binding, and technically, to the death. Set for the new moon. 7 days away. Renata picked up the letter. She read it twice. She set it down. "He doesn't want me back," she said. Calm, certain. "He wants to not lose, I know," Dagmar said. "This isn't about me. It's about controlling the story." He publicly threw away a mate, and now that mate is alive, in his rival's territory, looking healthier than she ever did in his. She almost smiled. That's embarrassing for a man like Lucian. And embarrassment is the only wound he's ever really feared. Caspian, by the window, didn't look up from his notes. "What she said," he murmured. Dagmar's eyes found hers across the room. "So what do we do?" Renata asked. And the Alpha of Shadowvale, the man who had built his whole life on the truth that every decision carries a consequence, looked at the white-silver woman who had walked out of a forest and into the center of his world. "We prepare," he said. 7 days. That was all the time the new moon would give them, and Renata used every hour of it. She trained through the mornings with Maeve, until her body stopped flinching at its own strength. She studied maps with Caspian through the afternoons, until she could see a region the way he did, not as land, as relationships, as trust. And in the evenings she sat with Winfrida, learning what a white-silver wolf was, what it had meant once, long ago, what gifts it carried, and what those gifts demanded in return. "There is something I have not told you," Winfrida said, on the 5th night, firelight low between them, "because I wanted you to find your own footing first." "Of course there is," Renata almost laughed. "There always is." The white-silver line was not feared because it could fight, Renata frowned. "Then why patience, child?" The old woman's eyes glinted. "You'll understand when the moment asks you to," and she would not say more, which was, Renata was learning exactly the kind of thing the women in her life did when something enormous was coming. She also spent her evenings with Dagmar. Not training evenings, not strategy evenings, the other kind, the quiet kind. The kind where two people who have been very careful with their words slowly stop being careful. One night he told her about his father, a hard alpha, a man who taught his son that leadership was weight, never glory. He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. Deliberate, unhurried. "When this is done," he said, "I'd like to mark you properly. If that's something you want." The weight of the question sat between them, and she felt her wolf respond. Not the muted, broken thing the Thornwood bond had left her. Something clean, whole, undeniable. Like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting its entire life for exactly this key. "Ask me again," she said. After we win," he corrected, and she smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she believed the word "we" belonged to her too. The trial ground was a wide valley, neutral territory, where 3 pack borders met and none of them ruled. Packs arrived in the hours before dawn, warriors from 6 territories, elders, healers, witnesses. Torches planted in a great ring at the circle's edge. The moon was dark overhead, the new moon, the one that gives no light. But the torches burned gold, and warm Lucian arrived with 20 Thornwood warriors at his back. He looked the same, tall, polished, green eyes sharp in the torchlight. Saskia stood beside him in her training armor, And when her eyes found Renata across the valley, she held the gaze for one long moment. Her expression was not hostile, it was tired. Dagmar arrived with his counsel, quiet, organized, the way water fills a room, evenly, completely. Without any noise about it, he walked to the center of the circle and waited. The trial rules were read by the neutral elder of the Ridgeline pack, a woman named Pell. 35 years of running pack law, and absolutely no patience for drama. The terms were confirmed, the circle was sealed, and the two alphas faced each other. What happened in the next 40 minutes has been told 100 different ways, depending on which pack you ask. But here is what everyone agrees on: they were evenly matched. Lucian was faster. Dagmar had the greater stamina. The fight went on long enough that it stopped looking like a performance, and started looking like two men pushing through real exhaustion. Blood appeared, positions traded. The crowd went quiet, the specific kind of quiet that fills a place where nobody knows the ending. At the 38-minute mark, Lucian had Dagmar pinned against the circle's edge, and Renata stepped forward. Not because Dagmar needed saving, because this was never only his fight. She walked into the center of the trial circle. Every warrior on both sides moved at once. To intercept, 40 bodies surging inward, Pell's voice cracked across the valley like a whip. Hold, they held. Barely, because the Alpha trial of claim had one provision almost nobody ever invoked. Because almost nobody ever qualified for it. A claimed mate, one who carried a bloodline of recognized standing, had the right to step into the circle and exercise independent choice. When Frida had found it in the records, Caspian had confirmed the legal text. Pell had verified it 2 days before. Lucian stared at her across the circle. "This is against tradition," he said. His voice was mostly composure and partly panic. "Read the charter, Lucian," Pell said. "Calm as winter. She has standing." Renata took a slow breath and she shifted. It did not come gradually. It arrived all at once, like a tide that had waited offshore her entire life. Finally allowed to reach the sand, the white-silver wolf rose, completely, for the first time. And the valley went absolutely silent, because white-silver wolves were not supposed to exist anymore. The bloodline had been counted lost for 3 generations. Most of the wolves in that valley had never seen one, and no story had been adequate. Renata stood in the center of the circle, her silver-white coat catching the torchlight, until she looked less like a wolf, and more like moonlight that had decided to take a shape. The fire around the circle's edge flared, gold and copper, reaching toward her, like something ancient recognizing something even older. Then she shifted back, breathing hard, but she straightened, and she stood the way she had spent these weeks learning to stand. Like she belonged somewhere. "I am Renata," she said. Her voice carried across the silent valley. "The moon goddess placed a bond between me and Alpha Lucian Heir. He refused it. In front of his whole pack. He called me unfit. She let that sit. I am exercising independent claim, and then it happened. The thing Winfreda had refused to explain. The thing the white-silver line was truly feared for. Because as Renata stood there, silver light still clinging to her skin, something moved through the valley, not a sound, a feeling. The witnesses from 6 territories felt it at once. A pull, gentle, undeniable. Like the moment in a song when every voice in a room finds the same note without being told. The white-silver line was never feared for its strength. It was feared because it could not be owned. Because where it walked, wolves remembered what it felt like to choose freely. To belong to themselves first. And a thing that cannot be owned, cannot be ruled, cannot be used as a prize in another man's game. Lucian felt it too, and for the first time in his polished, performed life. He understood what he had thrown away at that fire 3 months ago. Not a quiet woman, not an ordinary mate. The one thing his entire authority had never been built to survive. A person who could not be controlled. His 20 warriors stood at the circle's edge, and one by one, they lowered their eyes, not in submission to him, in recognition of her. "You can't do this," Lucian said, and his voice cracked clean down the middle. "You were nothing. You were—" "I was never nothing," Renata said, quietly. "I was just standing in a room that needed me small, so it could feel large." The valley held its breath. "I am not in that room anymore." She turned away from him, and she did not look back. She crossed the circle to Dagmar. He was on one knee, bloodied, spent, watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face. Not surprise, something deeper. Something that looked like recognition of a thing he had known for weeks, but had not let himself fully believe until this exact moment. She stopped in front of him. "I choose Alpha Dagmar Voss," she said. "To the 6 territories, to the witnesses, to the dark, lightless moon overhead, as my mate and my alpha, of my own free will, which is the only kind that has ever mattered. Dagmar rose, not rushed about it. He never was, and without performance, without any audience left in his eyes at all, he reached up, pushed her hair back from her neck, and asked, so quietly only she could hear it, "Is this what you want?" "I told you," she said. "Ask me after we win." "We won," he said, and she felt the bond settle into her skin. Not painful, not the way she had spent her whole life imagining it. Something entirely different, like a door opening into a room that had been waiting for her, specifically. Her name carved over the threshold. His mark claimed her, gently, completely, and in the same breath, the broken fragment of the Thornwood bond, the cracked thread that had drained her for 3 months, snapped clean and dissolved, like frost when the morning sun finally reaches it. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 months, everything was quiet. The roar of the crowd came back slowly. From 6 territories, a sound she would struggle later to describe. Approval, maybe, or something larger. Several people were weeping, including Halvard, who would spend the following week insisting he absolutely was not. Nobody believed him. In the season that followed, Renata did not build the way alphas traditionally build. Not through conquest, she built through relationship. She established a healer exchange between 5 packs, the kind of program that could catch a broken bond like hers before it ever left a woman dying on a border gate. Ottilie ran it. In its first season, it saved 4 lives. Saskia brokered a lasting peace and made a new home in neutral ground. And the woman Lucian Heir had called unfit became the most respected Luna in 6 territories. There was one more thing she did. On a quiet morning, alone, she went back to the small hill where her mother was buried. She knelt, put her hand on the cool stone. "You made me small to keep me alive," she said, "and I spent my whole life thinking that smallness was the truth of me. It wasn't. It was your love." Wearing a frightening shape, she let the tears come, and let them go. "I'm not small anymore, Mama, and I'm not in danger. You can finally rest." And when she rose, some old invisible weight she had carried her whole life was simply gone. On a night in the new spring, Dagmar found her at the wall of the compound, looking east, toward the mountains. "When you showed up at my border," he said, "I thought you were going to be a problem." She looked at him. "I am a problem," she said. "The best kind," he said. He put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, with the ease of 2 people who have learned each other's weight. The moon was rising, ivory now, clean and full and kind, the soft kind, the kind from the good stories. Not the bone-colored omen she had crossed the ridge beneath, 3 months and a lifetime ago. She had stopped counting moons as markers of loss. This one was just beautiful. 2 years can change a woman. Renata stood on the high wall of the Shadow Vale compound at first light, watching the valley wake. She was not the same person who had collapsed at these gates with blood on her collarbone and nothing but her name. That woman had been running. This one had stopped. She was Luna now, the most trusted in 6 territories. Not the loudest, never the loudest, but the one packs called when something broke and they didn't know how to fix it. The healer exchange Ottilie built had spread to 9 packs. It had a name now. People used it without thinking. A mother in a far territory could lose a mate bond and not die alone in the dark, because of a program, because of a woman who once almost did. Her sister had come to live in Shadow Vale that first year. Brielle March, older now. A little less fury, though only a little. She ran the gate guard rotations with the kind of fierce precision that made Halvard quietly grateful she was on his side. Dagmar came up beside her on the wall. He still moved the same way, unhurried. Like a man who had never once needed to rush to prove he could. "You're up early," he said. "I'm always up early. You're up early and you're frowning." She didn't answer right away, because she didn't have the words yet. Just a feeling, the kind that arrives before the news does. "Something's coming," she said. He didn't laugh at her. He had learned, over 2 years, never to laugh at that. The rider came at noon, not a warrior, a healer. A young woman named Sifa from the Cold Water Pack, 3 territories north. She had ridden 2 days. Her horse was foam-flecked and shaking, and so, when she finally dismounted, was she. They brought her to the council room, gave her water. "Let her breathe, I came myself," Sefa said. "I didn't trust a letter. Not for this, for what?" Renata asked. Sefa looked around the room, at Dagmar, at Caspian, older now, glasses still sliding down his nose, at Ottilie, who had come the moment she heard a healer had ridden in half dead. "There's a child," Sefa said. The room went quiet. A girl, 7 years old. Her name is Illa, Sefa swallowed. 3 weeks ago, during a fever, her eyes changed. In front of me. I was the only one who saw it. She looked at Renata. Steady now. They went silver, bright silver like moonlight in glass. Renata did not move, but something in her chest, an old scar near her collarbone, went strangely warm. Say that again, she said softly. Silver, Sefa repeated. I've only ever seen one wolf with eyes like that. She paused. You, 2 years ago, in a valley, when I was a witness at your trial. The council talked for an hour. Renata didn't say much. She let them. Caspian laid out the politics. Ottilie laid out the medicine. Dagmar listened, the way he always did, gathering everything before he spent a single word. But Renata was somewhere else. She was 7 years old, in a memory she didn't have but somehow could feel. A mother's hands. A whispered story about falling, about a scar, about staying quiet, staying small, staying safe. She knew exactly what was happening in the cold water pack right now. A mother was hiding her daughter. Where is the girl now? Renata finally asked. With her mother, Sefa said. A woman named Brenna. She's terrified. She made me swear not to tell anyone. Sefa's jaw tightened. I broke that oath to come here. Because I think if I'd kept it, that child would disappear. And I don't mean run away. The room understood her meaning. Because a white-silver bloodline was not just rare, it was wanted. The kind packs went to war over. The kind that got stolen, or used. Or worse. Who else knows? Dagmar asked. That's why I rode myself, Sefa said. Because I don't think we're the only ones who found out. The second rider came that night. This one Renata knew, copper hair, travel-worn coat. A way of standing that dared the world to underestimate her. Saskia Rhea crossed the gate at full dark the way she always seemed to. Bad news rode well with her. It always had. You felt it too, Renata said. Not a question, I heard it, Saskia said. In the north corridor. Where I keep my ears. She came inside. Shook off the cold. There's a man. He rode under Lucian once. He was one of the 20 warriors Lucian brought to your trial. Stood at the torchline and watched the whole thing. I don't remember him. You wouldn't. He was never anyone. That's the point. Saskia took the cup of tea Ottilie pressed into her hands. His name is Garrick. When Thornwood fell apart, men like him fell with it. And men who lose everything start looking for one big thing that could give it all back. Renata's blood went cold before Saskia even finished. He's looking for the child, Renata said. He's looking for a silver wolf, Saskia corrected. He's been looking for 2 years, ever since he stood in that valley and watched you rise and understood what you were worth. He couldn't take you. She met Renata's eyes. So he's been waiting for another. And now there's a 7-year-old. And now, Saskia said quietly, there's a 7-year-old. Renata didn't sleep. She walked the wall. East, toward the mountains, the way she always did when her chest was loud. Dagmar found her there. He always did. You're going to go to her, he said. Yes, you don't have to. We could send protection. Bring the child here. Handle it from a distance. No, Renata's voice was flat. Certain. I have to go. Because I know exactly what's happening in that house right now. And there's only one person in 6 territories who can walk into it and be believed. Dagmar was quiet a moment. The woman who lived it, he said. The woman who lived it. She turned to him, and in the dark he saw something on her face he hadn't seen in 2 years. Not fear. Something older than fear. Something that went all the way back to a fire and a man who called her nothing. When I was a baby, Renata said, my mother made a choice. She decided I was safer small than seen, and she was wrong. Not because she didn't love me. She loved me so much it nearly erased me, her voice caught. I spent 23 years thinking I was nothing. Because the one person who knew the truth was too afraid to tell me. She looked east. I will not let another child grow up the way I did, not while I'm still breathing. The cold water pack sat in a cold, beautiful valley 3 days north. Renata rode in with a small group. Halvard, Saskia, Ottilie, no army. An army would have announced exactly what they were protecting. And announcing it was the one thing they could not do. Brenna's house was at the edge of the territory, small, plain. The home of a woman who had spent 7 years trying not to be noticed. Renata knew the signs before she even knocked. The drawn curtains, the too quiet yard, a house arranged deliberately to be forgettable. She had grown up in a house exactly like it. Brenna opened the door a crack. A thin woman, tired eyes. The specific exhaustion of someone who has been afraid for a very long time and has learned to live inside it. I don't know who you are, Brenna said. And I don't have anything you want. You have a daughter named Illa, Renata said gently. And you've been hiding what she is since the night she was born. Brenna's face went white. She started to close the door. "I'm not here to take her," Renata said quickly. "I'm here because I was her." She pushed back the collar of her coat, showed the faint silver scar near her collarbone. "My mother hid me too. And I came to tell you something nobody ever told her in time." The door stopped, held there. Trembling. "What?" Brenna whispered. "That it doesn't work," Renata said. "Hiding them. It doesn't keep them safe. It just teaches them to be afraid of themselves." Brenna let her in. The inside of the house was as careful as the outside. Everything tucked away. Everything quiet. And in the corner on a worn rug sat a small girl with a wooden toy and a wariness no 7-year-old should have. Dark hair, round face, and eyes that in the dim light looked perfectly, ordinarily brown, until they didn't. The girl looked up at Renata, curious, and for half a heartbeat in the grey afternoon light, something silver moved behind the brown. There and gone, like a fish under ice. Renata's breath caught. It was like looking into a mirror that showed her the past. "Hello, Illa," Renata said. She lowered herself to the floor, slowly to the child's height, never above her. "That's a good wolf you've got carved there." Illa held the toy tighter. "Said nothing. My mama told me to be quiet too," Renata said. Soft, like she was telling a secret. "She told me to make myself small." "Do you know why?" The girl shook her head. "Barely, because she loved me," Renata said. "And she was scared. And sometimes grown-ups love you so much they get the two things mixed up." Illa stared at her, and in a voice so small Renata almost missed it, the child said, "My eyes are bad. Mama says I have to hide them, so nobody takes me away." Renata's heart cracked clean down the middle, because she knew that sentence. She had lived that sentence. 23 years of it. "Your eyes," Renata said, "are not bad." She held the girl's gaze, silver and brown and frightened and beautiful. "Your eyes are the most extraordinary thing in this whole valley. And anyone who tries to take you away from a world that should be lucky to have you." She stopped, steadied her voice. "Is going to have to come through me first." That night, Brenna and Renata talked until the fire burned low. "You think I was wrong," Brenna said. "Not angry, just tired." "To hide her, no," Renata said, and she meant it. "I think you did the only thing fear let you see. I'm not here to judge you, Brenna. My own mother did exactly the same thing. And I spent 2 years learning how to forgive her for it." She paused. "I came so you wouldn't need 2 years." Brenna looked into the fire. "There's a man," she said quietly, "coming. I've felt him getting closer for weeks, like a storm you can smell before you see. His name is Garrick," Renata said. "We know." Brenna's eyes filled. "Then take her. Take Illa somewhere far. Hide her so deep that no one—" "No," Renata said. The word landed in the small room like a stone. "You don't understand," Brenna said. I understand better than anyone alive," Renata said. "And that's exactly why I'm telling you no." She leaned forward. "If we hide her, Brenna, then he wins. Even if he never finds her. Because she spends her whole life in a hole in the ground, believing she's something to be ashamed of. I will not hand that man a frightened woman 20 years from now. The way my mother almost handed him me." Brenna was crying now. Silent. The way people cry when they've been holding it for years. "Then what?" she whispered. "What do we do?" And Renata, who had crossed a mountain once with no plan but to survive, looked at her with the calm of a woman who finally knew exactly what she was made of. "We do the one thing he'll never expect," she said. "We stop hiding. Garrick came on the 3rd night. He did not come alone. He came with 11 men, hard men. The kind that gather around someone who promises that one big score will fix a lifetime of being no one. He expected a frightened mother, a hidden child. A quiet snatch in the dark. What he found was every torch in the Coldwater Valley lit. What he found was a circle, wide, open, witnessed. The way the old trials were witnessed, and standing at the center of it, not hiding, not running, was the most respected Luna in 6 territories, Renata, and she was not alone, because over the 3-day days, riders had gone out, quiet ones. To every pack the healer exchange had ever touched, to every Luna and healer and pack mother Renata had sat with over 2 years. To everyone who owed Shadow Vale a debt of trust they had been waiting to repay, they had come not warriors massed for war, representatives, witnesses, from 9 packs, standing in a ring around a small house at the edge of a cold valley. Watching, Garrick stopped at the torchline, and for the first time the thing on his face was not greed. It was the dawning understanding that he had walked into something he did not control. "Garrick of nowhere," Renata said, her voice carried. The way it had carried in that valley 2 years ago, clear and unhurried and impossible to argue with. "You came for a child," she said. "You came believing that a white silver wolf is a thing you can own. a prize you can take, a way to make yourself large by making someone small. She let that sit. You're not the first, she said. There's always a Garrick in every generation. A man who looks at something rare and beautiful and sees only what it could do for him. Her eyes were steady. Let me tell you what every one of them gets wrong. She raised her voice. Not in anger, in something cleaner. The white silver line was never feared for its strength. It was feared because it cannot be owned. She gestured, slow, to the ring of 9 packs standing in the torchlight. Look around you, Garrick. 2 years ago you stood at a torch line just like this one and watched me rise, and you thought you understood what you saw. You didn't. You thought you saw a weapon. What you actually saw was this, the 9 packs, standing together. For a child none of them had ever met. You can't steal a silver wolf, Renata said. Because the moment you reach for one, the whole world remembers what it feels like to refuse to be owned, and it stands up. Together, Garrick's men looked around the circle, 11 of them against 9 packs. And one by one the math arrived on their faces, because they had come for a frightened woman and a hidden child. An easy thing, a quiet thing. They had not come to fight an alliance. They had not come to be witnessed by half the territories in the region, every face memorizing theirs, every pack ready to remember exactly who had ridden into a cold valley to steal a 7-year-old. This was not a battle Garrick could win by being strong, because it was not a battle about strength at all. You can leave, Renata said. Quietly, almost kindly, right now, and every pack here will watch you go. Or you can take one more step toward that house. She did not raise a weapon. She did not need to. And every pack here will watch that too. And there will be nowhere in 6 territories you can ride that someone won't know your name. And what you came here to do. Garrick stood at the torchline a very long time. A man weighing a lifetime of being no one against the worst decision he would ever make. And then, slowly, with the bitter face of a man who has finally understood he was always going to lose, he turned his horse, and he rode into the dark. He did not come back. But the story wasn't over, because as Garrick's men melted into the night, Renata felt a small hand slip into hers. Illa the child had come out of the house, past her mother's reaching arms. She had walked across the lit yard in front of 9 packs, in front of every face that had ever made her mother afraid. And she was not hiding. They were going to take me, Illa said, looking up. Weren't they? They were going to try, Renata said. The girl was quiet a moment, thinking the enormous thoughts of a small person who has just understood something true about the world. You didn't hide me, Illa said. No. Mama always hides me. Renata knelt down, to the child's height. The way she had the first day. Your mama loves you more than her own life, Renata said. And love that's afraid sometimes looks like a locked door. But love that's brave, she squeezed the small hand, looks like standing in the light, with people on every side of you. So you never have to be afraid of what you are again. And then Illa did the thing no one expected. She let go of Renata's hand. She stepped forward, to the edge of the torchlight, where all 9 packs could see her, and she let her eyes go silver, on purpose. For the first time in her life, the whole valley caught its breath. Not in fear, in wonder. 9 packs watching a small girl choose freely to be exactly what she was. It was the bravest thing Renata had ever seen, and she had crossed a mountain alone once, so she knew brave when she saw it. They stayed in cold water a week, long enough to make certain Garrick was truly gone. Long enough for the 9 packs to part as something more than allies, as a thing that had stood together, once, for a reason worth standing for. People remember that. It binds tighter than any treaty, and long enough for Renata and Brenna to make a plan. I can't go back to the way it was, Brenna admitted on the last night. Curtains drawn. Both of us holding our breath, she looked at her daughter, asleep by the fire. But I don't know how to do the other thing, the light. I've been afraid so long I don't remember the shape of anything else. You don't have to do it alone, Renata said. And then she said the thing that had been forming in her chest for 3 days. The idea that would become the work of the rest of her life. Come to Shadow Vale, she said. Both of you. There are others, Brenna. There have to be. Children like Illa, like I was, scattered across the territories. Hidden in quiet houses by frightened parents who love them too much to let the world see them. Her voice was steady. Certain, I want to build a place where a child with silver in her eyes can grow up knowing exactly what she is, surrounded by people who guard her, not by hiding her, but by standing around her in the light. Brenna stared at her. You'd do that, she whispered. For children who aren't even yours. They are all mine, Renata said simply. Every child who was ever told to be small is mine because I was them, and nobody came in time. She looked at the sleeping girl, so I'm coming, in time, for all of them. She brought Illa and Brenna home to Shadow Vale. Dagmar met them at the gate. He looked at the small girl. The girl looked back at him with eyes that just then were perfectly, ordinarily brown. He crouched down, the big, unhurried Alpha, folding himself to a child's height. You must be Illa, he said. The girl studied him with the seriousness of the very young. You're the one she crossed the mountain to find, Illa said. Dagmar's eyebrows rose. He glanced up at Renata. She tells the stories, Renata said, on the ride. I may have left some parts in, all the parts, Illa corrected. She told me all the parts, and Dagmar Voss, who had built his whole life on precision and discipline and the cold understanding that every decision carries a price, laughed, really laughed, the kind that changed his whole face. Well, he said to the girl, then you know we keep our gates open here. For anyone brave enough to walk up to them and say their name. Illa considered this, then she stuck out a small hand, solemn. Like she'd seen the grown-ups do, Illa, she said. Of Coldwater, Dagmar shook it. Just as solemn, welcome home, he said. The house Renata built had no official name for a long time. People just called it the Hearth. It started with one child. Then there were 3. Then a frightened father rode in from the far west with a boy who flinched at his own reflection, and there were 4. Word moved the way word moves. Quiet at first, then everywhere, there is a place where children who are too much for the world to handle are simply held and taught and loved out loud. Ottily's healers worked there. Caspian taught the older ones to read a room, read a map, read the politics of a world that would always have its garrix. Maeve trained their bodies until they stopped apologizing for taking up space, and Brielle ran their safety, the gate watches, the quiet patrols, with the ferocity of an aunt who had once nearly gotten herself banished defending her own sister at a different fire a long time ago. And Winfrieda, very old now, told them the stories, the real ones, about a bloodline that was never feared for its strength, but it was Renata they came to. In the evenings, when the fires were low and the big feelings came, the way they do for children carrying more than their share, she would sit with them, and she would say the thing no one had said to her in time. You are not too much, she would tell them. You were never too much. You were just standing in rooms too small to hold you, and then she would smile. So we built you a bigger room. Years later, a traveler passing through the region asked an old healer about the Silver Children, about the Luna who gathered them, about whether they still were true. The healer, who was safer, much older now, the one who had once ridden 2 days half dead to break an oath, smiled. They're true, she said. All of them. And the Luna, the traveler asked. Renata, is it true she was rejected once? Cast out? Told she was nothing? Sepha's smile deepened. That's the part people always get wrong, she said. They think the story is about the night she was rejected. It isn't. The rejection was just the door. She looked out toward the valley, where a cluster of children with extraordinary eyes were learning, out loud in the light, exactly who they were. The story is about everything she did after she walked through it. On a night in late spring, Renata stood on the high wall again, older now, Dagmar beside her the way he had been for years. Below them, the hearth glowed warm, full of children who would never have to learn what she had learned the hard way. Illa was nearly grown now, teaching the younger ones. Her silver eyes open to anyone who cared to look. You did it, Dagmar said quietly. We did it. No, he shook his head. I helped. Caspian helped. We all helped, he looked at her. But you're the one who knew that hiding a child to keep her safe and erasing her are the same wound. Nobody else in 6 territories could have known that. Because nobody else lived it. He paused. You turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into a home for 100 children. That's not help. That's you. Renata didn't answer for a while. She was thinking about a frightened mother, long ago, holding a baby with silver in its eyes, making the only choice fear allowed her. I think she'd be proud, Renata finally said. My mother, I think she'd look at all this and finally understand that I was never something to be afraid of. The moon was rising. Ivory and clean and kind. She'd be proud, Dagmar agreed. And below them, in the warm light of a house full of children who would grow up knowing exactly who they were, someone laughed, bright and unafraid and entirely too loud for any room too small to hold it. Renata smiled. That sound, she thought. That was the whole point. That was everything she had crossed a mountain for all those years ago, without even knowing it yet. a child. Laughing in the light, refusing, with her whole heart, to ever be made small. There is a particular ache that no one warns a mother about. It does not come when the child is small, when they need you for everything. When your arms are the safest place in the world and they know it, it comes later. It comes when they're grown. When they stand a little taller than you remember, when they stop asking your permission and start telling you their plans, and you realize all at once that the work of loving them well was never about holding on. It was about getting them ready to leave. Renata learned this the way she learned most things, the hard way. On a grey morning, years into the life of the hearth, when Illa was no longer a small girl with a wooden wolf, she was 20 now, tall, calm, silver in her eyes whenever she pleased. She taught the young ones. She settled their fears the way Renata had once settled hers. She had become, without anyone quite deciding it, the heart of the place. And on that grey morning, a rider came through the gate carrying a sealed letter. Renata felt it before she read it. That old feeling, the one that arrives before the news does. Something was coming, and this time, it was coming for her daughter. The letter was from the Iron Reach pack, far to the south, powerful, old, the kind of pack that did not ask for things so much as inform you they would be taking them. Their alpha was a man named Corin Vale. Renata had met him twice, once at a regional council, once at a border negotiation. He was sharp, cold, effective, not cruel exactly, but the kind of man who saw positions on a board. The letter was polite. That was the first thing that frightened her. It proposed an alliance. Iron Reach would extend its protection over the hearth and all 9 packs in Renata's network. Trade, safety, the full weight of the most powerful pack in the south, standing behind a house full of vulnerable children. In exchange, they asked for one thing. A bond. Cornvale's heir would take a mate from the hearth, to seal the alliance, to bind the 2 houses. And the heir, the letter noted, with the careful neutrality of a thing that had been chosen long before it was written down, had already expressed a particular interest in the white-silver wolf, in Illa. Renata read it 3 times, then she set it down very carefully, like it might go off, and the first thing she felt, the very first before thought before reason, was a single white-hot word rising up from somewhere ancient in her chest. No, no, not Illa, not her girl, not the child she had pulled out of a dark house and taught to stand in the light, not the daughter she had raised to be free, traded across a border like a treaty seal, like a prize, like a thing. She knew exactly what this was. She had lived exactly this. A powerful man looking at a rare wolf and seeing not a person but a possession, a way to make himself larger. She would not allow it. She would write back tonight. She would refuse. She would. And then she stopped, because a memory surfaced. Unwelcome. Sharp, a frightened mother, long ago, holding a baby with silver in its eyes, deciding out of love, out of terror, what that child's whole life would be. Without ever once asking the child, Renata went very still. Her hands, resting on the letter, went cold. Oh, she thought. Oh no, because she had spent her entire life learning one lesson above all others. That the cruelest thing you can do to someone you love is decide their life for them, even to protect them, especially to protect them. And here she was, about to do it, to Illa. She found Dagmar in the council room, older now, grey fully come in, still unhurried, still the most solid thing in any room he stood in. She handed him the letter without a word. He read it. His expression did not change, it never did. But she had spent a lifetime learning to read his stillness, and she saw the muscle tighten in his jaw. No, he said simply, setting it down. That was my first thought too, Renata said. Good, then we agree. We refuse and we don't get to refuse, Dagmar. He looked up at her, sharp. She's 20, Renata said. Her voice was steady, but it cost her. She's not a child we're protecting anymore. She's a woman, and this letter isn't ours to answer, she swallowed. It's hers. Dagmar was quiet a long moment. You don't want this, he said. I want to burn it, Renata said. I want to ride to Iron Reach and tell Corin Vale exactly where he can put his polite little alliance. Her voice cracked. I want to lock the gates and keep her here, safe, with us, forever. She pressed her hand flat against her chest, against an old scar, and that, she whispered, is exactly why I can't be the one to decide. She told Illa that evening. She had thought about how to do it for hours, how to frame it, how to soften it, how to make sure the girl understood she was free to say no, that no one would ever force her, that the whole thing could be over with a single word. In the end, she just handed her the letter, because Illa was not a child to be managed. And the deepest respect Renata could offer her was the respect no one had ever offered Renata at that age. The truth, whole, unsoftened. With the choice left entirely in her hands, Illa read it in silence by the fire. Renata watched her face, watched for fear, for anger. For the flinch she half expected it didn't come. Instead, Illa set the letter down and looked into the flames for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Older than her years, you hate this," Illa said, "with everything I have, but you gave it to me anyway." "Yes." Illa looked at her, and something passed across the young woman's face. Something that looked a great deal like love, and a great deal like understanding, because no one gave it to you, Illa said softly. Renata could not speak. She only nodded. What Illa did next, Renata had not expected. "I want to go and see," Illa said. The words landed like a stone in Renata's chest. "See what?" "Iron Reach, Corin Vale. All of it." Illa turned from the fire. "You taught me to read a room before I judge it. You taught me that the worst thing a person can do is decide something is true before they've looked at it with their own eyes." A small, wry smile. "You can't be angry that I learned it." "I'm not angry," Renata said. "It was almost true. She stopped. Because the word she wanted was terrified, and that was not Illa's burden to carry. "You think it's a cage dressed up as a courtship," Illa said, reading her the way Renata had taught her to read everyone. "And maybe it is. Probably it is." She crossed the room, knelt by Renata's chair, the way Renata had once knelt by a frightened child on a worn rug. "But here's the thing you taught me, Mama. The thing you don't seem to remember right now." It was the first time she had ever called Renata that Mama. "You don't keep someone safe by hiding them," Illa said gently. "You keep them safe by letting them stand in the light, and see clearly and choose for themselves." She took Renata's cold hands in her warm ones. "Even when the person who loves them is scared to death of what they'll choose." They rode to Iron Reach together. Renata had insisted on that much, and Illa had allowed it, because some battles are not worth fighting, and a mother's presence on a long road is one of them. 3 days south. The land grew harder, grander. Iron Reach was nothing like the hearth. Where the hearth was warm, low, full of noise and children and the smell of bread, Iron Reach was tall and cold and beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Built to impress, built to remind you of your place. Corin Vale met them in a great stone hall. He was exactly as Renata remembered, sharp, courteous in the way of men who have never once needed to be warm, and beside him stood his heir, a young man, perhaps Illa's age. And here was the first surprise of many, because the young man did not look at Illa the way Corin's letter had implied. Not like a position on a board, not like a prize. He looked at her like he was bracing himself, like a man who had been put forward for something he was not sure he wanted either, and was too far down the road to stop it. His name was Tallinn, and he, Renata realized with a slow turn in her stomach, was trapped in this exactly as much as Illa was. The negotiation was supposed to take a day. Illa made it take a week. She did the thing Renata had taught her. She read the room. All off it, not just Corin's words, but the space between them. The way the Iron Reach wolves moved, who was afraid, who was tired, who agreed with their alpha and who only pretended to. And she did the same with Tallinn. She did not let them keep her at arm's length, formal and supervised. She asked to walk the territory. She asked to meet the healers, the trainers, the pack mothers, the people who carried the daily weight, the people no one ever thinks to consult. By the 3rd day, she understood Iron Reach better than its own heir did. By the 5th, she understood something Corin Vale had spent his whole reign hiding. His pack was not as strong as it pretended. The alliance was not generosity, it was need. Iron Reach's old allies were drifting. Its borders were stretched. Corin had looked at the network Renata had quietly built, 9 packs bound by trust instead of fear, and he had understood, the way Garrick once had, that he was looking at something more powerful than strength. He had not wanted to protect the hearth. He had wanted to own a piece of it, and the silver wolf was meant to be the chain. Illa came to Renata's room on the 5th night. She sat on the edge of the bed, the way she had as a child when the big feelings came. "You were right," Illa said. "It's a cage, a beautiful one, with a kind enough boy locked in it next to me." She was quiet a moment. "Tallinn doesn't want this either," he told me. "His father decided his whole life before he was old enough to argue." A bitter little laugh. "Sound familiar?" "It sounds like every story I've ever known," Renata said softly. "So I'm going to say no." And here was the strange thing. The thing Renata had not braced for. Relief did not come because she watched her daughter's face as she said it, and there was no triumph there. No freedom, just a quiet, settling sadness. The look of a person closing a door they had not entirely wanted to close. Illa, Renata said carefully. What is it you're not telling me? Illa looked at her hands. The boy, she said. Talin. I like him, not the way the letter meant. Not yet. But, she struggled for it. There's a person under all that armor. A good one. Stuck somewhere he never chose. And when I leave here, I leave him in it. Alone, she looked up. And I keep thinking about all the children at the hearth who are safe because 9 packs decided to stand together. And I keep thinking, what if there could be a 10th? Renata understood then that her daughter had walked all the way around the problem and come out somewhere no one had expected. Not the cage Corin offered, and not the simple refusal Renata had wanted. Something else. Something Illa had built herself, the way Renata had once built a healer exchange out of her own near death, out of the worst thing. A better thing. I'm not going to be traded, Illa said, slowly, working it out aloud. I won't be a seal on someone else's treaty. That part's over. I'll tell Corin Vale no to his face. Her eyes went silver, not in fear, in resolve. But then I'm going to offer him something different. A real alliance, not a bond, not a prize. Iron Reach joins the network, same as the others. Bound by trust, not by chaining a woman to a man neither of them chose. He'll refuse, Renata said. Men like that always want to own the thing. Sharing it isn't enough, maybe, Illa said. But his pack is failing, Mama, and his heir is on my side. And every pack mother I've talked to this week is so tired of being ruled by a man who sees them as furniture. She smiled. The exact smile Renata used to wear in front of a fire she refused to be afraid of. I learned from the best. You don't beat a man like that with strength. You beat him by being the thing he cannot own. And letting everyone watch him fail to hold it. What happened in the great stone hall the next morning, the Iron Reach wolves would tell for a generation. A 20-year-old woman from a house of hidden children stood before the coldest alpha in the south and refused him. Plainly, without fear. In front of his whole pack. I am not a chain, Illa said. I am not a seal. And I am not a prize to be added to your house to make it look stronger than it is. Corin's face went hard. Then there is no alliance. There's a better one, Illa said. If you're brave enough to take it, and she laid it out. The network. The trust. The 9 packs that protected each other not because anyone forced them to, but because once long ago, they had stood in a cold valley for a child none of them had ever met, and discovered it bound them tighter than any treaty ever could. Your borders are stretched, Illa said, gentle, merciless. Your allies are drifting. You can keep ruling by fear and watch it crumble. Or you can join something that doesn't crumble. Because it isn't held together by one strong man, she let it sit. It's held together by everyone choosing, freely, to stand. The hall was silent, and then, one by one, the Iron Reach pack mothers, the healers, the tired ones who had carried the weight for years, began very quietly to step toward her. Including Talin. Corin Vale looked around his own hall, and saw the way Garrick once had, the way Lucian once had, that he was about to fail to hold the one thing he most wanted to own. He signed the alliance 8 days later, the real one. The one Illa wrote, no bond, no trade of a woman, just 10 packs, now, bound by the only thing that had ever held anything together. And Renata, watching her daughter broker a peace that the strongest men in the south had failed to force, felt the strangest thing. She felt unnecessary, in the very best way, because the girl did not need her. Not anymore. Not to protect her, not to decide for her, not to stand between her and the world. Illa had walked into the coldest hall in the territories, and she had stood in the light, and she had chosen completely for herself. The work was done. The work had always been this, not to keep the child small and safe forever, but to make her so completely herself that she could walk away and be fine. And Renata understood, with an ache that was equal parts grief and pride, that was exactly what was about to happen. Illa was not coming home. She told Renata on the last night, by a fire the way all the important things in their life had been said. I'm going to stay, Illa said, a while, not forever. But Iron Reach needs someone who remembers what it's for. Talin can't do it alone. And the pack mothers trust me. She looked at Renata, bracing. I think I can do real good here, Mama. The kind you taught me to look for. Renata had known it was coming. She had known for days. It did not make it easier, I know, she said, and her voice held. Mostly, you're not going to try to talk me out of it. No, you're not going to tell me it's too dangerous, or too far, or that I'm too young. No, Renata said again. And then, because the truth was the only gift she had left to give. Though I want to. With everything in me I want to. I want to put you in a cart and take you home and lock the gate and keep you exactly where I can see you, safe, forever. Illa's eyes filled. But that's the cage, Renata said softly. Isn't it? The pretty one. The one love builds when it's afraid. And I swore a long time ago in a dark house in a cold valley that I would never build one of those for you. She reached out, took her daughter's face in her hands, the way no one had ever held hers. So go, do good, stand in the light, and know that there is a warm house 3 days north with a gate that never locks, and people who will love you out loud for the rest of your life. No matter how far you wander, Renata rode home alone, not the way she had once crossed the eastern ridge, broken and shaking and running for her life, differently, slower, with a grief in her chest that was not the screaming kind, the quiet kind, the kind that means something mattered, the kind that is just love with nowhere left to put itself for a little while. She cried somewhere on the second day, alone on the road with no one to see, and then she wiped her face and kept riding, because that too was something she had learned a long time ago. You keep moving, even through the part that hurts. Dagmar met her at the gate. He took one look at her face and did not ask. He just opened his arms, and she walked into them and stood there a long time. In the place that had become, over all these years, the safest one in the world, she stayed, he said. Not a question, she stayed, you let her. Renata pulled back, wiped her face, and against everything she smiled. I didn't let her, she said. She's 20. She doesn't need my permission for anything, a breath. I just made sure that when she chose, she did it free, the way I never got to. Dagmar looked at her for a long, long moment. Your mother, he said quietly, would understand that. Better than anyone. And Renata, for the first time, did not feel the old ache when her mother was named. She felt something closer to company. The hearth went on, children came. Children grew. Children left, one by one, the way children are supposed to, walking out into a world that was a little kinder than it had been, because a woman with silver in her eyes had spent her life making it so. Some of them stayed close. Some of them wandered far. All of them knew the gate never locked. Illa wrote often, long letters in a strong, certain hand. Iron Reach was changing slowly the way real things change. Talon had become, in time, something more to her than a boy locked in a cage beside her own. That part of the story, Illa wrote, she would tell properly when she came to visit, which she did, often, filling the warm house with noise and then leaving it quieter, the way the loved ones always do. And Brielle, who had once nearly gotten herself banished defending a sister at a fire, grew old guarding a house full of children. She never married. She said the hearth was family enough and meant it, and was right. On a night in late spring, many years on, Renata stood on the high wall one last time in this story. Grey now, truly grey, slower than she used to be, but upright. Always upright. Dagmar was beside her. He had greyed too, slowed too. But he still stood like the most solid thing in any place he occupied, and he always would, right up to the end, which was not this night, but was no longer so very far away, and neither of them was afraid of it. Below them, the hearth glowed warm. Do you ever think about it? Dagmar asked. The fire. The night he called you nothing. Sometimes. Any regret? Renata considered the question honestly, the way she considered everything. She thought about a young woman at a fire, certain her life was over. She thought about a mountain crossed in the dark, a scar near a collarbone, a letter from a frightened mother, a child on a worn rug, a daughter standing in a cold stone hall, refusing to be owned, a gate that never locked, a whole life, built entirely out of the worst night of it. No, she said. Not one. The moon was rising, ivory and clean and kind, the soft kind, the kind from the good stories. She had stopped counting moons as markers of loss a very long time ago. She counted them now as something else, as all the nights she had been here, standing in the light, with the people who loved her out loud, in a life no one had chosen for her, a life she had crossed a mountain once with shaking hands and no plan but to survive, to find, and found.